Welcome to Consider This Next on Civic Side TV Radio. I'm your host, Kacie Luaders. Here on the show, we connect with diverse voices across the civic science landscape. Scholars, practitioners, and leaders shaping the intersections of science within our society. Our mission? To uncover lessons from their work and translate them into actionable insights. Like all programs from the Civic Science Media Lab, whether on video, radio, or digital print, Consider This Next is here to keep decision makers, from researchers and practitioners to local community members, informed, inspired, and equipped with the latest insights. Today, we're talking with Corey Gumbs, founder of the Black Podcasters Association and board member of Air Media. Corey brings a unique perspective to science communication. His journey from music to web development to podcasting shows how diverse pathways can lead to powerful science advocacy. In our conversation, we'll explore how Corey's early fascination with taking apart radios and reading Time Life science books evolved into a mission to make tech, science, and politics accessible to his community. We'll discuss why he believes anyone with curiosity and responsibility can become an effective science communicator, and how podcasting offers a uniquely powerful medium for reaching audiences who might never encounter science through traditional channels. Very excited to have Corey on the program today. You may have seen him around within the podcast industry, and we have a very exciting story about how science actually was one of the gateways into podcasting for Corey. And not to step on your toes or anything, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell everyone listening all of the things that you do.
I want to, introduce myself is always a prop. My name's Corey Gumbs. I am the founder of the Black Podcasters Association. I am also a currently sitting board member of Air Media, an organization dedicated to independent radio professionals and podcasters. I'm also a web developer. I have my degree in web development, and that's a hobby as well as a passion of mine. And I'm also a musician. So my background is in music, hip hop. So my family's background is in music and teaching. This brought me right here to this conversation in this industry as well.
Could you tell us more about your career pathway from music to software to podcasting and being on the boards of major organizations? How did this all get started?
I ask myself all that too. It's been a lifelong journey. I come from a family of teachers. Education has always been important. For me, as a kid, I gravitated towards sciences, engineering, and stuff. I used to like tinkering with things and breaking, and taking them apart. So like we had a radio or something. One of the things you hid that from me because I was always taking them apart. My grandparents had a huge library. I just was enamored with these science books and encyclopedias. So it was these things that, like I would just sit and read. There was one science book on the universe. I would always read it constantly. It was like one of those Time Life books they used to sell on TV. My grandparents had that. So I would read those and the history books. Music is my background. My father was a jazz musician. My mother's a teacher. Grandparents on my mother's side were teachers. So I had a lot of influence. Musicians on both sides of my family. As a kid, teenager, young adult, I tried my hand in the music industry, interned at Def Jam, been on tour, was trying to be a rapper. But my real love wanted to be in the studio. So I went to school for that. Never finished. Went to Five Towns College out in not New York City, out in Long Island to try my hand at studio engineering. I was in a rap group. We signed contracts and learned the hard way, like a lot of artists do, like when you don't have right representation. And that led into me getting a job at an internet cafe. And this is around the time of Napster. And I was watching a lot of business news, and that was the whole Napster lawsuit. And I was like, this is going to be the future. This is before YouTube and all that stuff. And I remember going to my friends, we need to figure out how to get ahead of this with our music. After getting out of a bad contract, Godfather style, I decided to create a website. The education side of me, the influence always came. So I was like, okay, we need to utilize the internet to educate people. So I created a website called don'tgetjerked.com at the time. I was like 21 years old, pitched it to my friends. I was like, we can have our own web pages for artists. They can sell their music. We could teach the music business. I was like, we need to be independent of the music industry because I saw what was going on with Napster. And web development now is way cheaper than it was then. I don't even know how I was paying this guy, but I was working, making 8,000 an hour, was working, paying him. He was developing it in phases. We had this whole plan, and I stumbled onto what became podcasting. Where you had to find an RSS feed, you had a player, and I was like, this is something artists could use. And long story short, we started the process. Then I found I was going to be a father, and I had to choose take care of my son or keep putting money into this project. I'm supposed to do family, whatever. So I chose to raise my son. But it was always a plan that was always there, but I couldn't afford the web developer. So I started to learn how to code. And this kid at the internet cafe would teach me how to do HTML. And then it just became a hobby that turned into something I really came to love over the past 20 years of my life until I went to school to get my degree. But the science and tech stuff was always there. And then I got back into podcasting as a fan in 2013 because I thought it was something that was in the early 2000s. I didn't know it was going to become what it was. And my friend, and the funny part is my friend introduced me to the Sam Harris podcast, the neuroscientist and renowned atheist. So like I got caught up in that. And then that's how I got into Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. And then I just started getting back. It got me back into the whole love of science again. And it's been this whole journey from that into the podcasting space. I know we were talking, and during that 2013, 2014 era, that's when me and my friend were having conversations about science, tech, politics, history. And I decided to go back. I got injured on my job, so I decided to go back to school to get my degree in web development. And people would be like, normal stuff. Oh, you guys should start a podcast. And we decided we were going to do a podcast on tech, science, and law or politics because at the time we were having conversations with people in our community, and it was science illiterate, politics illiterate, and tech illiterate, and we were like, we need to bring something together that can put it in a conversation that our people understand to get them to understand that this is the future, and they need to stop watching Terminator and The Matrix and start embracing these things and realize there's a space here for us as far as economics and policies go where we can uplift our community. So I know it's a long-winded origin story, but every piece led up to where I'm at now.
That's incredibly helpful because now we can pick apart the origin story more. You said you and your friend decided, based on conversations we're hearing in our community, we want to be the ones to help just present conversations about the intersection of tech, science, and politics for our audience, for our community. What ways can other people say, like, they don't have a degree in robotics or AI, but they're paying attention to what's happening, they're reading the articles, they want to have the conversations with people in their community? Do you think the podcast medium is something anyone with that interest should start? What kind of advice would you have for someone now who's, I want to start having conversations with my community about tech and science?
If you looked at my friend and I in our backgrounds, we were both blessed to have families that encouraged the weirdness when we were little. First, start there. We need to embrace the weird, quote unquote, weirdness of your child and the interests that they have when they move into these areas. But if you look at our backgrounds, we both have spotty backgrounds when it comes to life about certain things that we've engaged in and done over being in the environments we grew up in. You would never think that we were like and I think that was part of the conversation. So like people would call us and we were able to communicate in a street sense or whatever, those technical terms and stuff, and use analogies or use ways to communicate to people who didn't understand what we understood. Somebody asked me about computers when I tell them that computers are stupid, right? I have to communicate why they're stupid in a way they understand. In order for a computer to do anything, I have to tell it what to do step by step. And so if I turn on a computer, it's not going to do anything, right? All those things that you consider automatic is code that says when power is pressed on, do this. If this, then that. And it's a series and thousands of lines of code. It works 10 times faster than the human mind. Our minds work pretty fast as well, right? But it's so fast that it comes back as intelligent. So it's able to just disseminate all this information within milliseconds versus what may take you years to learn, become an expert, a computer can do in a matter of minutes. And that's where I say, tell people it's stupid. Like, don't I always tell people your code is breaking more than it's working. When your computer hangs up on a website, something's going on. These are things I've learned in my space. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, we're software engineers or whatever, but this is just the basic things I've learned and being able to express that to people in a way so that they understand and they don't feel intimidated. I think through podcasting, you can do that. A lot of information has come out over the past 10 years, especially since COVID, about the connection between the host and the audience. It's probably the medium where the listeners are very connected to the host, has a very high influence on them. So that's that up for alone. Once you build your audience up, I think that's one of the most important things is that you're able to communicate with people who are seeking you out, that are committing their time to listening to you, and you're able to express your views and thoughts, as we've learned also with the politics side of podcast, how influential that is. You can communicate to, even if it's a small group of people, you can build some kind of connection with them where you have a circle of influence over them. You can use that force for good or evil, but you have it. So for somebody that's listening that may be interested, but I hate to say this because it goes against the professional side of me, but sometimes you just got to do it, right? I'd rather you just pick up a mic and start talking about the thing of interest than to sit and ruminate. What do I do? What do I do? And you're like a lot of us, we've learned to just figure it out as we go along. That's why I built the community I built to help people through that process where they're not by themselves. The most important thing for anybody who's interested in science or talking about science is be responsible in the information you disseminate. Do your research. I can openly say that to people and build an audience. If I was going to leave with that point, that would be the most important. Just start it and just be responsible in the information you disseminate from a science point of view. Make sure if you don't know, you clarify to people. Be transparent in that capacity.
That's a lot of why we're having these conversations on the Civic Science TV network. We don't want people to feel like they have to be level 3 or 4 coders or professors of this science or that science to find an entryway into the world of STEM, into the world of science. And it's maybe just having that conversation, hearing those people who've had a life experience that they've had talk about something they're curious about, that could be that first spark that leads to, let me do some more research on this. Let me take a class on this. Let me read a book about this. I think that's exactly the point of why we think highlighting folks in the science world is so important. And something that is top of mind for many practitioners, folks in media, folks in science, folks in everyday life to this day, tech, science, and politics. You being on the board of AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio, I'm sure you are well aware of the current media landscape, particularly in public radio, funding of various research, and it is all very much tied together. And so I'm curious if you have an opinion, particularly in this time, of why it's important for the people who, again, don't necessarily have the top credentials to be able to use independent platforms to start conversations, to talk about the important things that are affecting us, whether we know it or not. Just any thoughts that you may have about that.
Before it came on, I was thinking about something. I remember Carl Sagan before he passed away. He was a big proponent about pointing out how little scientific experience we have within Congress. This was in the 70s, 80s, right? He was warning us of the future, which is where we're at right now, which is the intellectualism portion of politics. And it's a dangerous game. But I also think, unfortunately, with the news of like public radio and the attack on it, and it just shows you how important those mediums are. The beauty I always loved about podcasting, you can't gatekeep it. Worst come to worst, I go spin up a server, I create an RSS feed like they used to do back in the days. It's not as hard as people think. Plenty of YouTube videos on that. And I could distribute my podcast from my platform, from my website, right? Kind of what pirate radio is for the whole theory of pirate radio. History repeats itself, and we have numerous examples of history where government starts to limit access to information and and the effect it has. Most recent, we have a very big one during World War II as the prototype of modern society of how that looks. So I think it is important for us to really be upset and not just be reactive, but be proactive, saying we have technology to distribute information. And yes, the public broadcast corporation, like, that was important. It helped for over 50 years to give us PBS and public radio. And maybe, and there's always a time in history for me where it's like there's that catalyst, right? It's okay, we've gotten so used to having this thing here and thought it was going to exist forever, right? They thought horses were going to be the medium of transportation, right? Forever. And it was for thousands of years. And then comes the steam engine and then the combustible engine. And now look, right? Maybe this is a call for us to say, how do we use the tools that we have access to? Yes, we should be upset. Yes, we should get it out your system. But now comes a part where, okay, how do we use these tools in front of us to reinvent? There's always that pivotal moment. I love history. There's always that pivotal moment where it's like the norm is challenged, and it's like there's the people who rise to the occasion and just completely Steve Jobs, whatever people may feel. That's the iPhone in 2004, 6, or whatever, right? That changed cellular communication. It changed technology. There's always that moment in history where somebody says, "Here's an issue. How do we solve that? How do we use what we have to solve that problem?" I encourage people who may be feeling that way, advocate more for just starting a science podcast because of the attack on public radio. Because people, regardless, they're gonna miss these. It's gonna create a gap people want to find. So this space for you to fill in that capacity. So that's the best way I can explain it. Explain it is a pivot moment, and that's been a series of my life. When you listen to my story, I went from music to programming, from programming into podcasting, and there was a lot of those pivotal moments. Okay, when I look back, it was just like it wasn't a smooth transition. Life happens, but I can use what I learned over here to come to in this space. So what I learned in music, with audio engineering and stuff, plays a whole lot of into podcasting, right? Because it's an audio space. Despite all the incorporation of video, it's still audio space. What I learned in programming helps me, like, part of the computer with programming, which is one reason why I want to tell people to get their kids into it, is it teaches you problem solving. I was terrible at math as a kid, horrible, still am, but programming made me way better in math. And it was able to communicate to me in a mathematical way that helps me to understand math a little bit better. I'm not a math genius, but I could tell you fractions was I was terrible with fractions, but because of programming, learning the pro code, you deal a lot with decimals and fractions and stuff. I've had to practice and learn it. I'm not the greatest, but I still had to learn it. And I understand it better than I could have ever. It's just those weird little things, but you got to find a way to communicate that resonates with people. So I encourage people interested in science and STEM and all that stuff that are questioning whether they should use podcasts as a medium. If you get that one person that listens to your podcast and you turn them into the next astrophysicist or the next nuclear physicist or tech founder, then you've done your job. You can't get everybody. How do I explain something, especially a complicated topic, to where it's easily consumable? I bring that into podcasts. How can we create this to resonate with people, to influence them, to get do a call to action, right? Like whether it's pick up a book to read it, whether it's go watch this video from read about Galileo or do one of those things, right? And it's just weird how, like, being in music, it's a form of communication, right? So you learn to translate that. And then the programming part is, how do I break it into steps that drive people, like small bits and pieces for people to consume and lead them to the point I'm trying to get them to. It's all interconnected. But programming taught me to slow my mind down, not just in code, but in life, right? How do I work step by step? And I think that's important in this day and age for children. There's so much noise going on around them, and because of technology and iPads and iPhones and streaming and the constant speed of information and access to it, right? When I have discussions, I think about, how do I support this community? I have to think about, what are the steps we need to take? How do we break the problems down and bring it step by step without it being overwhelming, without it being consuming and easy for them to digest and consume and apply, right? Because we have to apply what we've learned as well. And that was for me, since I'm not in the tech space of programming, it keeps me connected to programming because I'm still using the principles that I've learned in my day-to-day life in business. People need to understand science is not just science, it's a part of everything you do. That's why I like natural sciences, because when you walk outside, you see a bird fly. But flying on planes, like you see you can see the similarities about the design of a plane to a bird, right? It makes you appreciate things around you more because now you understand how they work.
That is the goal,
Right.
making everyone know that science is all around us, whether you are aware of it or not. And whatever your connection, for some people it's coding, for some people it is gardening, for some people it is looking at the stars with the telescope. that can just be your entryway
Right.
into this field. I have loved chatting with you. I've learned a lot about you and just the ways that we should, as media professionals, can make connections and how science is all around us. How can people find out more about you?
You can find me on Instagram. I have my personal page on there. You'll see a lot of music and stuff on there. But then I also am the founder of the Black Podcast Association. But on each platform, it's different because of the length of the name. So you can just do a search for the Black Podcast Association and you'll find our accounts on there. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up, Corey Gumbs, CoreyGumbs. I'm very accessible. I'm very collaborative. So I would love to hear from people, get their feedback, and answer any questions they may have.
Now that we've heard Corey's insights on using podcasting to democratize science communication, when it comes to making science accessible across diverse communities and platforms, consider this next. How might your personal background and experiences actually be strengths in science communication rather than limitations? Corey's journey from music to programming to podcasting shows that unconventional paths can create powerful communicators who connect with audiences that traditional academic voices might not reach. Are you prepared to be transparent about the limits of your expertise while still sharing your passion for science? As Corey emphasized, audiences respond to honesty. You can communicate what you've learned from physics or computer science without claiming to be an expert, as long as you're responsible with the information you share. Could independent platforms offer you more authentic connections with your audiences than traditional media? The intimate relationship between podcast hosts and listeners creates opportunities for science education that go beyond formal presentations, allowing for the kind of conversational learning that can spark genuine curiosity. And finally, are you considering the pivotal moment we're in for science communication? With traditional public media under threat, there's both urgency and opportunity for scientists to build their own platforms and reach audiences directly, ensuring that scientific literacy remains accessible to all communities. And lastly, remember, effective science communication requires not just expertise, but the courage to start conversations and the wisdom to make complex ideas accessible to everyone. Before we sign off, I'd like to offer a big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in and engaging with these crucial topics. If you found value in this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us continue to bring you insightful conversations like this one. Until next time, keep nurturing your curiosity and stay connected to the science all around you. This is Kacie Lueders, signing off from Consider This Next on Civic Sci TV Radio. Stay curious.